Welcome to the Chopin channel. I'm Roberto Poli. Vincent Ong's decision to open his second round at the 2025 Chopin Competition with the Polonaise in A-flat major opus 53 was certainly a daring move. It's an unusual choice. The piece is almost always placed at the end of a recital program, mostly because it's a crowd pleaser. And at the competition, it predictably served as a closer in the programming of other contestants. By placing it at the beginning, Vincent turned the Polonaise into a prelude to the 24 Preludes. Filling 40 to 50 minutes of music by programming the complete set of 24 Preludes means being left with relatively little time. Because the rules required a group of 6 consecutive preludes from Opus 28, most contestants chose only the minimum. Vincent chose to play all 24. It meant that his program was essentially fixed. Almost 40 minutes were dedicated to the preludes, with little room for anything else. But then, another requirement to honor, a Polonaise, the available options being Opus 22, both Opus 26, Opus 44, or Opus 53. And so the question became not whether to include the Polonaise in A flat, but where to place it. Still, why not at the end? My inference is simple. Playing the Polonaise Opus 53 after nearly 40 minutes of preludes, especially after the physically demanding closing prelude in D minor, could have meant arriving to it in a state of physical and mental exhaustion. And so Vincent opened with a closer. But doing so meant facing the beginning of round two with a rather treacherous introduction where dynamic markings are difficult to project, and the chromatic triads distributed in fourths in the right hand can betray even the most secure technique. Beginning with this Polonaise under the pressure of the event in front of a hall filled to the brim was a dangerous move. Adrenaline can play terrible tricks, and beginning with this Polonaise, especially when all eyes are on you, and let's be honest, how many pianists can claim to have been heard live by tens of thousands of Chopin lovers worldwide, was a really risky card to play. Yet, none of that seemed to be in Vincent's mind as he tossed off the fourths, particularly the third set, which presents a different combination than the first two, with the panache of an extraordinary virtuoso who has never considered that these measures are supposed to be difficult. I particularly loved how the beginning of Vincent's second round was broadcast. While we are not shown his arrival at the piano in the YouTube video, only that he is about to sit, and I didn't get to see his second round in real time, I imagine his discreet presence as he approached center stage, stood by the instrument, gently nodded to the audience, and hinted at a smile, but maybe not, adjusted his jacket, and sat down. One of his fans wrote me an email a few days ago in response to several of the videos I made about Vincent, describing what she experienced while listening to his performances. She wrote her email in Italian, so I'm translating. It's difficult to express in words the quiver of the soul when Vincent approaches the piano, not to mention the treasure that follows. This is precisely how I imagined the moments that preceded the first frame. The sense of anticipation as he is expected to climb the stairs leading from the green rooms on the lower level to the stage. Then comes the change of camera angle. The hall shown from the back near the main entrance. It gave a cinematic perspective to the first E flat in octaves, played immediately upon sitting. I don't know why, but his opening reminded me of Rubinstein's performance in Moscow in 1964, minus the abrasiveness of Rubinstein's unvoiced playing. Apologies to all Rubinstein fans. Vincent played the E flat with such authority and presence, with a perfectly balanced sense of the four voices, two in each hand, that only someone who's thought of everything can achieve. And what followed was truly a treasure, as his fan wrote in her email. That first page was fearless, yet intelligently observant of Chopin's dynamic notation. Chopin never wrote anything that even remotely resembles this introduction, and the energy that Vincent builds across it is irresistible. With the promise of something raw in our face, so to speak, as the outcome of the introduction, Vincent then undercuts the arrival at the forte to a reasonable mezzo forte for the opening theme by sweetening the context. Here, I must commend Vincent for finding a solution to the systematically ignored pedal markings that Chopin proposes. These markings were written with a specific goal in mind, that of sustaining the harmony and, above all, the bass, which would disappear if the pedal weren't held. I believe there's a way to mitigate the problem by adapting the dynamic levels in the middle register where the accompanying figures are written. Here's my solution in my own recording. Given my tempo, more moderate than the average perhaps, It's also easier to manage the decay of sound, which in turn makes these long pedal markings somewhat easier. In any case, many pianists observe the staccato that Chopin marked, but not the pedal, perhaps to avoid confronting the resonance that comes out of it. Vincent, as I mentioned in another video, uses the sustain pedal masterfully, blending what would otherwise blur conspicuously by using quick pedal releases that do not entirely eliminate the resonance, but also by half pedaling through these eighth note octaves in the left hand, which he always plays with lightness and elegance. This is a tricky proposition because, strangely, following Chopin's pedal markings is sometimes criticized. As I've said before, we often hear about the importance of honoring the composer's intentions by following the score to the letter, avoiding undue subjectivity, carefully reproducing articulation, dynamics, etc. Yet, when it comes to pedal, it's the first thing to be ignored. And if you object that the pedaling wasn't followed, I'm thinking of the long pedal markings at the beginning of the Nocturne in D flat major, opus 27, number 2, for example, which many pianists modify even though it works wonderfully as written. Pianists themselves will respond with all sorts of excuses. The modern piano is different and the sound is too blurred. Chopin didn't obviously mean it. It must be a misprint, and so on. But the truth is that on a Pleyel piano from the early 1840s, Pleyels were Chopin's favorite pianos, and he wrote the Polonaise on one, this writing would have been blurred all the same, perhaps with a slightly different outcome, but it would have blurred. And so we can perhaps say that this was an aesthetic choice. I will devote a video about pedal markings in Chopin soon, because I think there's a lot of confusion about them. In any case, all this to say that I appreciate that Vincent didn't ignore these long pedals, but did something to represent the intended effect, unlike some of the other contestants who addressed only the staccato, and in doing so gave the theme a character that is not what Chopin seems to have desired, and that, in my opinion, deprives it of its nobility. I have to admit that at a first hearing, it seemed to me that Vincent drove the music of the Polonaise forward with excessive intensity. I have, of course, my own vision of the piece, which admittedly includes moments of dreaminess that may be considered off the mark. Particularly, my recording from many years ago indulges excessively at times, and if I played the piece again today, I would probably make different choices. However, with repeated listening, I came to realize that what Vincent was depicting, though different from what I envisioned, was defined by unrelenting fervor. Feverish, even. In the B section of the Polonaise, the way Vincent paces the episode counterbalances the drive that he expressed in the opening. I think it's more grounded, and perhaps deliberately so to create contrast. As I listen to Vincent's interpretation of the Polonaise, I'm reminded of an episode that took place in 1835 in which Chopin, according to Count Joseph Krasinski, arrived looking frail and unwell, then sat at the piano and began improvising, including a powerful set of variations on the patriotic song Poland is Not Yet Lost. After playing, he appeared brightened, animated, almost transformed compared to his earlier sickly appearance. The terrible events of 1830, which displaced so many Poles throughout Europe, were constantly on Chopin's mind as he settled in Paris. I'm reminded of this episode because the Polonaise Op. 53 requires quite a bit of physical prowess. By 1842, when he wrote the Polonaise Op. 53, Chopin's health had seen highs and lows. Particularly in 1841, he became gravely ill. There's also another tragic episode that marks Chopin's life. Only months before completing the Polonaise, his dear friend Jan Matuszynski had died of tuberculosis. In our arms, as Georges Sand wrote, Chopin and Sand apparently were present when he died. The horrific convulsions and blood spitting that marked Jan's final hours left Chopin traumatized. For the first time, perhaps, he understood the precariousness of his own illness. In witnessing his friend's death, he saw a premonition of his own. Less than 2 weeks after Matuszynski's funeral, Chopin and Sand settled into the serene atmosphere of Nohant, where Sand had a family home. His mind set on composing, and entertained by a few friends invited by Sand to lift his spirits, Chopin experienced what was perhaps one of his most positive periods, with good health and renewed productivity. It was then that the Polonaise Op. 53 was either conceived or completed alongside works like the Ballade in F minor and the Fourth Scherzo. And so, in the energetic writing of the Polonaise, we certainly see a Chopin revived, not only in good spirits, but in improved physical form, also thanks to Sand's attentive care. And speaking of physical form, I do want to get to the rhythmic drive that Vincent expressed in the E major section, the section that features the infamous left-hand octaves. This was once the mark of a virtuoso, a legendary passage that was treated with a sense of reverence, although today, given our technical standards, it's become simply, well, an octave passage. What impresses me in Vincent's reading is, ironically, not the octaves, which he plays, of course, with extraordinary flair, but the way he uniquely enunciates the melody in the right hand. There's a particular moment in the second part of the section, which repeats literally in the score, but naturally not so in Vincent's rendering, where the dotted figuration is intoned in a truly extraordinary way. The first time is already beautifully done in pianissimo, with the right hand melody shaped, emphasized, and declaimed. But the second time, and this is always true in Vincent's hands, isn't it? The second time sounds even more convincing, with the dotted rhythms slightly more emphatic and the melodic line emerging with greater energy. And what's more, he plays it while looking up. I love this moment in Vincent's interpretation, and I especially like that we can see him up close, something that we wouldn't be able to do unless we watched the streaming. These details were likely lost by those who were physically in the concert hall. And of course, I should mention the voicing of the lower line in the right hand when the upper line remains static, which is a quintessential Vincent moment. And then listen to and see the exuberance that bursts forth in this final stretch. The nobility that emerges in the section following the octaves is truly quite extraordinary. Although here, overall, I would have wished for a little more shade, a little more regret, perhaps nostalgia. This section precedes the final return of the main theme. It's a moment in which the music meanders melodically, it repeats obsessively. The harmony tries to find its place. I'm personally partial to more darkness, perhaps even some mystery, but I do understand what led Vincent to pursue a vision that is direct, impactful, and observant of the fact that this is, after all, a polonaise, a dance, not merely a moment of reminiscence. And who am I to complain? I can accept that difference and embrace it, of course. The way Vincent outlines the decrease in intensity leading to the final iteration of the main theme is really wonderfully persuasive. It reveals something distinct about his concept of the piece, as I mentioned, the idea that this is first and foremost a polonaise, and he certainly gives it that imprint. The return of the main theme in Vincent's interpretation is glorious, probably the best of all its appearances. And the final page, with its mounting frenzy, is again irresistible. We We are privileged to see close ups of Vincent's hands and face, but we are not given any camera angles that show what it means to see him, or any of the other contestants really, from the audience's perspective. Still, it appears obvious, particularly here, how the visual element may prevent us from fully appreciating what a true giant this diminutive man is on stage. And this Polonaise, what a thing to witness as an opener, don't you think? Given that no applause was allowed until the end of the performance, I can only imagine the restraint required of the audience to refrain from leaping to their feet, applauding enthusiastically, and shouting, "Bravo!" I would have certainly been the first one to do so.